Okay, so uh, we're diving into this gRPC versus REST thing for APIs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Right.
choosing between like a sports car
Uh-huh.
and a pickup truck.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, and then they both have their pluses and minuses, but
Yeah,
like
you got to know when to use which one, right?
exactly.
Okay.
So let's break it down.
Yeah.
gRPC, this newer thing, it's all about speed
Mm.
and being efficient.
Right.
It's like
Super fast.
sending data like through fiber optic cables.
Yeah.
It uses this compact binary format called protocol buffers,
Right.
which I guess is part of the
Yeah, that's how it gets a lot of its speed and efficiency.
secret sauce.
Think of it this way. You're building, a large system
Right.
with like tons of microservices
Yeah.
all talking to each other.
Yeah.
gRPC can really reduce that latency, give you a performance boost. And there's this cool thing called code generation.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
You define your API in a special language,
Right.
and tools will automatically generate the code for you. Oh, wow.
In multiple languages.
Okay, so that saves you a ton of time.
Nice for productivity.
Yeah, less boilerplate, fewer errors.
Yeah, who wouldn't want that?
Right.
But I've also heard some things about gRPC being a little finicky
Yeah, can be.
when it comes to things like dependency management
Yeah,
and like browser compatibility.
that's true. It can be a bit more complex to set up
Okay.
than REST, especially if you're working with a bunch of different languages
Right.
or need to support web browsers directly.
Uh-huh.
So there is a learning curve there.
Okay, so gRPC, it's speedy, efficient,
Yeah.
but maybe a little complex and not as universally loved as REST.
Right.
Speaking of REST, it's been the go-to API approach.
For years now, yeah.
For years, it's familiar, widely adopted.
Mhm.
It just works.
It just works, exactly.
So,
REST relies on HTTP and JSON,
right.
which is human readable,
Yeah,
and pretty much every tool out there understands it.
that's awesome.
It's like a universal language
I like that, yeah.
for APIs.
So that ease of use is a major selling point for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And, debugging, I imagine, is pretty easy
Yeah.
because you can just use your browser's developer tools.
Yeah, pop it open, see exactly what's going on.
But even REST
Of course.
has its downsides, right?
Right, Jason. While it's human readable, it can be verbose,
Oh, yeah.
which impacts performance when you're dealing with large amounts of data.
Okay.
And while REST aims to be stateless,
Right.
maintaining those RESTful principles,
Uh-huh.
like HADOS can be challenging.
Yeah, I was going to say, HADOS, it sounds great on paper, but
In practice, it's
all
like
right, a lot of components.
keeping this giant web of links
Yeah.
all organized.
It's a noble goal.
Right.
But most REST APIs end up being more pragmatic
Right.
in how they do it.
Yeah. So we've got these two approaches, each with their own.
Strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. But how do they actually play out in the real world?
Yeah, that's the question.
When do you use which one?
Like, when do you reach for gRPC and when do you stick with REST?
Well, let me tell you about this project I worked on.
Okay.
We were building this massive internal system
Right.
with like hundreds of microservices.
Wow.
We were using REST,
Okay.
but we were hitting performance bottlenecks left and right.
No.
The communication between all the services was just bogging things down.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
It was rough. So we decided to try gRPC.
Huh?
And it was a game changer.
Really?
Our internal communication became lightning fast.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, it was like
No.
someone hit the fast forward button,
So gRPC really shines in those internal systems where
where speed and efficiency are key.
you need the speed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what about external-facing APIs,
That's a good question.
where you might have clients using all sorts of different technologies?
In those cases, I think REST is often the safer choice,
Okay.
just because it's so widely adopted.
Right.
And it's flexible.
Uh-huh.
You don't have to worry about compatibility issues
Makes sense.
or forcing people to use a specific technology.
So gRPC for internal speed demons,
Yeah,
REST for the public-facing diplomats.
I like that.
But what about real-time applications?
Oh, yeah.
Like live chat or collaborative editing?
That's where gRPC's bidirectional streaming comes in.
Oh, yeah.
It's like having a live video call.
Okay.
Both parties can talk and listen at the same time.
So it's perfect for,
Perfect for real-time data synchronization.
wow. So it's not just about speed, it's about,
The type of communication.
yeah, like how you need to communicate.
Exactly. Choosing the right tool for the right job.
Okay, so far so good. We got gRPC for internal speed,
Right.
REST for external flexibility,
Yes.
gRPC again for real-time magic.
Uh-huh.
But software systems,
Always changing.
they're constantly evolving.
We're evolving.
So how did these two approaches handle
API evolution.
API evolution
I
and
see
maintenance,
this.
yeah.
That's a great question. They both have their quirks when it comes to versioning.
Oh, yeah.
With gRPC, even small changes toward your protocol, buffer definitions can break compatibility with older clients.
So
It's like changing the blueprint of a building
yeah,
after you've already started construction.
that sounds like a headache.
It can be.
What about REST?
REST is generally a little more forgiving,
Okay.
especially if you're using version numbers
Right.
in your API endpoints.
But even with REST, you can run into breaking changes.
You can if you're not careful.
So it sounds like no matter what you choose,
Yeah.
careful planning is key.
Planning and communication.
Yeah, you need to think about how your API might evolve
Yeah.
and design for that flexibility.
Absolutely. And that brings us to tooling and developer experience.
Right, let's talk about that, like what it's like to actually work with these two API styles on a day-to-day basis.
So gRPC has this fantastic code generation feature.
Oh, yeah.
Saves you a ton of time and effort.
Oh.
But you can run into issues with protobuf compatibility
Uh-oh.
across different languages.
Right.
Sometimes those .proto files can get messy.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen.
What about REST?
Yeah.
REST has its own code generation tools as well,
Okay.
but even those can have their quirks.
Right.
You might find yourself tweaking the generated code.
Yeah, I've had to do that before.
So there's always going to be some manual work involved.
It sounds like no matter which path you choose.
It's the reality of software development.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but also
Yeah, the tooling.
the tooling and the developer experience.
The whole experience.
So you got to think about things like debugging tools, testing frameworks,
Yeah.
and the overall maturity of the ecosystem.
The ecosystem, yeah.
It seems like making the right choice between gRPC and REST requires a pretty holistic view.
Definitely.
You can't just focus on speed or simplicity.
You got to look at the big picture.
The big picture.
And that brings us to the why behind the choice.
Okay, let's talk about what really matters when making this decision.
So when you're facing this dilemma,
gRPC versus REST.
the first question is, what's your use case?
Okay, so start with the why.
What are you trying to achieve?
What's the purpose?
Are you building a high-performance service mesh
Okay.
where speed is everything?
Uh-huh.
Or are you crafting a public API for a bunch of different clients
Right.
with different technology stacks?
Yeah.
Your use case will heavily influence your decision.
So choose the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And then you got to consider your team's expertise.
Right.
Are your developers comfortable with protocol buffers and gRPC?
Okay.
Or are they more familiar with RESTful principle?
Yeah, you don't want to choose something
Right.
that your team's going to struggle with.
And then finally, you got to think about long-term maintainability.
Right.
How easy will it be to evolve and version your API?
Okay.
Do you have a process for managing API changes
Uh-huh.
and ensuring backward compatibility?
That's important.
These are crucial considerations for the long-term health of your system.
So it's like a balancing act. You got to weigh the benefits against the drawbacks.
Yeah.
And think about your specific context.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right. It depends.
The best choice depends on your unique needs.
Yeah. And that's what makes this so interesting.
It does.
Let's dive into some specific examples and see how these trade-offs play out in the real world.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's get into some real-world scenarios.
Yeah.
You know, I remember this one project.
Okay.
We were all excited about gRPC and its speed. We were like, let's use it everywhere.
Uh-huh.
But then we hit this roadblock.
What happened?
We had to integrate with a third-party system
Oh.
that didn't support gRPC at all.
Yeah, that's a classic pitfall. You can get so excited about the new tech
Right.
and forget about
All the integration points.
compatibility, yeah.
Yeah, we learned that the hard way.
What did you do?
We had to build this whole middleware layer
Oh, no.
just to bridge the gap.
to make it work.
It added so much complexity and overhead. It was like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Ouch. That's a good way to put it.
It highlights like how important it is to think about the ecosystem.
The bigger picture.
Yeah, and the tools that your partners are using.
Exactly. Make sure everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. Another time we were building a web application
Okay.
and we thought, oh, gRPC, let's use it for everything.
Yeah, the future.
Yeah. But then we realized that gRPC's browser support wasn't really there yet.
Yeah, browser compatibility can be a challenge with gRPC.
It was a big challenge.
There are workarounds,
Right.
but they add complexity.
Yeah. And it's not as seamless as just using REST.
Right.
We ended up rewriting a lot of our code to use REST.
Wow.
It was a lesson learned.
Yeah, you got to understand the limitations
Before you go all
before
in.
you jump in.
Speaking of limitations, let's talk about API evolution.
Okay.
I remember working on this project,
Duh.
we had to make some changes to our gRPC schemas.
Oh, yeah.
And even like small changes.
Yeah.
They cause this ripple effect
It's like a domino effect.
throughout the entire system.
Those protocol buffers can be tricky.
Yeah, they're great for typing and backward compatibility, but
But if you change something,
even a tiny tweak
yeah, it can break things.
in unexpected ways.
It's like changing one ingredient.
Mhm.
In a recipe, it can change the whole flavor.
We had to be so careful
I bet.
when evolving our gRPC APIs.
Yeah. Lots of testing.
Yeah, we had to test every little change.
Right.
On the other hand, I've seen gRPC do some amazing things,
Oh, yeah.
especially for those real-time applications.
Like what?
I remember working on a live captioning system,
Okay.
and gRPC's bidirectional streaming was a game changer.
That makes sense.
It was like having this direct connection
Yeah, high bandwidth.
between the audio source and the captioning engine,
Wow.
and it worked flawlessly.
Even with all that data.
Even with all that data coming through,
That's impressive.
we tried using WebSockets,
Mm.
but gRPC was so much better.
Blew them out of the water.
You know, I know we've been talking a lot about the technical stuff,
Yeah.
but we can't forget about the human element.
Right, people.
Yeah. I remember working with this team.
Okay.
They were so excited about gRPC,
Mm.
but they didn't really grasp the complexities of dependency management.
Oh, yeah. Dependency hell.
It can be a nightmare.
Especially with gRPC.
All those different languages and versions.
Yeah.
It gets messy. Wow, we spent so much time
Trying to fix things.
trying to resolve all those compatibility issues.
Yeah.
It was a good lesson, though,
It was.
about how important it is to manage those dependencies
Yeah, and make sure everyone understands.
and that everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
And it's not just about technical skills, it's about the team's mindset.
Yeah, their approach.
Yeah, I've seen teams just jump into gRPC
Head first.
without really thinking about the implications,
Right.
especially for things like API design.
Inversioning. Yeah.
It's important to have a good understanding of RESTful principles.
Even if you're using gRPC,
Yeah, otherwise,
you might create an API that's hard to use
that's no good.
and hard to maintain.
And sometimes
Sometimes the simplest solution
the simplest solution is the best.
is the best.
Like good old JSON over HTTP.
Yeah,
It can be more than enough
especially for public APIs.
where you need that compatibility.
Yeah, and ease of use.
It's about choosing the right tool for the job
Exactly.
and not getting caught up in all the hype.
Right.
Sometimes a simple REST API can be more effective.
Then a really complex gRPC implementation.
Yeah. It all comes down to
Your needs.
your needs and constraints
So we've seen gRPC succeed
and fail.
and stumble a bit. Yeah,
It's a powerful tool, but it's not a silver bullet.
definitely not.
What are your final thoughts on this whole gRPC versus REST thing?
Well, I think it's important to remember that technology is always evolving.
That's true.
What's cutting edge today might be old news tomorrow.
So we need to stay informed and be willing to adapt.
Absolutely. And there are some interesting developments on the horizon.
Oh, really? Like what? Oh, really? Like what?
Well, there are these tools like gRPC.
Okay.
They're trying to bring gRPC to the web.
To the web.
Yeah, imagine having the speed and performance of gRPC
Right.
in your browser applications.
That would be a game changer.
It would open up so many possibilities.
For real-time interactive web experiences.
Exactly.
Wow. And with WebAssembly too,
Yeah, WebAssembly is interesting.
we might see even more ways to handle API communication.
Right, because WebAssembly lets you run code
Yeah.
written in languages like C++
Right.
directly in the browser.
So it could bridge that gap
Yeah, potentially.
between gRPC's performance and the web.
It's exciting to think about.
Yeah, so the lines between gRPC and REST might start to blur,
They might.
with each approach kind of borrowing from the other.
Yeah, we might see hybrid solutions.
Right.
That combine the best of both worlds.
Or maybe something completely new will come along.
That's always possible.
That's what's so cool about software development.
I know, it's always changing.
Always evolving, new challenges, new opportunities.
Keeps things interesting.
So what does all this mean for us as software engineers?
I think it means we got to be pragmatic
Okay.
at API design.
Right.
There's no one right answer.
Yeah.
We have to consider our use case,
Our team
our team's expertise.
and the long-term implications.
Exactly.
We have to weigh the speed of gRPC against the familiarity of REST.
And the support.
Yeah, and think about those real-world challenges.
Like dependency management,
Right.
browser compatibility, API evolution.
It's a lot to consider.
It is, but it's important.
We need to stay informed about new stuff like gRPC and WebAssembly.
Yeah, and be open to new solutions.
And most importantly,
Most importantly,
remember that technology is a tool.
it is.
It's up to us to use it wisely.
To build great things.
Well said. So
Yeah.
to wrap things up,
Yeah.
there's no clear winner in this gRPC versus REST debate.
No, it depends.
It's about choosing the right tool for the job
Exactly.
and being ready to adapt.
As things change.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was fun.
Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries.
Absolutely.